Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about fishing pressured and clear water bass fishing. So now the approach to fishing for these fish, to catch the maximum amount of fish and sometimes the bigger fish you can catch, it's going to be mainly on your finesse gear. So what is going to be the finesse gear you mainly throw? I'm thinking small, 3-inch, 2-inch, sometimes 4-inch baits. I'm thinking a weightless senko, drop shot, swim bait, and mainly those 3 baits too, just because these fish are going to be, these largemouth especially, are going to be suspended in the clear water. That's just where they feel most comfortable, especially when there's lots of pressure, lots of people fishing, lots of pressure, very clear, like 15, 20, 30 feet of visibility. And along with that visibility, with the pressure, throw very, very light line. On here, this is not even what I'd call the lightest line I would throw. This is like 7-pound Sunline Sniper. Typically, I like to throw 6-pound, 5-pound, even 4-pound, especially in my drop shots. That's the line size I like to throw. So another thing with your finesse fishing, it all matters about even your presentation as a self coming out to the body of water. You're not going to be wanting to make this big ruckus on shore, and because the bass can even feel the vibrations coming from the shore. That's what their lateral line is for, feeling vibrations from the prey and predators. So you look like a big predator if you make a lot of vibrations and going up to the water really loud. So key things are stealth. When you go up to the water, sometimes there'll be a bass right on the shore and it'll be impossible to catch them if you're just standing straight up. And one of the little differences I've done, especially when there's a bass right on shore and I want to catch him, is even just crouching. I just crouch down, make myself appear smaller, can be the way to catch them sometimes. With your approach, you want to cast, if there is no bass along the shoreline, sometimes that's what we get a lot in Illinois, is because we have a lot of grass flats. So they'll come right up to the shore on those grass flats or be out on them, especially on breaks. So as I was talking about with casting, you want to cast just a little bit farther from where you can see, because one of the key things with bass, they can see you and feel you before you can see them. Now we're going to talk about some of the baits I like to use in these clear water, very pressured areas. One of my first options I use is a small 2.8 Keitech. This gets bit everywhere. There's not a single place I would not throw a 2.8 Keitech, especially in clear water. You're throwing it on, pretty much this is also what I got on one of my finesse rods. 7.3 medium, I got on 7-pound test. Not the exact jig head I'd use, but since I ran out of swim heads, I used a little Ned rig head. It worked just fine, caught some fish on it before. And yeah, I use it everywhere. So, going on about 2.8 Keitech, to adapt this into, I would say, dirtier water, you'd want to throw this on a little underspin. My favorite underspin to use on them is a Cool Baits underspin. And my favorite, like, normal swim bait head will be a Dirty Jigs guppy head. 1/8 ounce, 1/0, fish it any time of year, and a lot of people don't throw it, so it's going to work better than most baits I've noticed in these areas, because a lot of people are throwing wacky rig, which is a deadly bait. We'll get back to the wacky rig, and a Ned rig and a drop shot. They're all good baits to use, but this exceeds a lot of the other baits when all these other get fish. But every single bait has their own time and place to use them. Now, next off, we're going to use the Ned rig. Everyone's heard the Ned rig. It's been gaining popularity over the past 3 years. This specific one is a 3-inch Roboworm. I think it's their Ned worm, I think it's called. I could be wrong on that, but it's also in Aaron's Green Pumpkin. I also like to throw Ned rig worms on like Morning Dawn. I throw them on so many colors. It's just to spice it up, because I throw Ned rig a lot, and a lot of other people throw Ned rig too. So I throw like Morning Dawn, Craw, which is a Z-Man color. Z-Man's got good colors, but these Roboworms got some really good West Coast colors that I like a lot to use. Next, this is a version of the Ned rig worm, but I don't know if I'd really call it a worm. It's a craw-based profile. Right here, as you can see, the craw-based worm. I'm gonna put it like this. Yeah. Now, why would I mention a cross-style worm when there's so many other styles of Ned rig like style baits I can use? Well, if you guys didn't know, crawfish are a really good food source for these largemouth, especially smallies. If you live around where the Chicagoland area, you know the Fox River. I always throw crawfish style baits there. Even though they got shad in there, man, they eat crawfish style baits up. It's a very important bait to throw, I'd say. Like, I'd never go to the lake without a crawfish like style bait, like this kind of bait, or even a finesse jig, which we'll go on later. But yeah, make sure you add this to your arsenal, especially if they're not eating the Roboworm, or not the Roboworm, the Ned rig worm. So the next bait we're going to talk about is a drop shot. This is a drop shot worm. This is a Jackall flip shape, one of my favorite drop shot worms. Roboworm actually makes a lot of good drop shot worms too. I like a lot to use, but Jackall flip shape's also a very good one. Also, the swim bait, these 2.8 Keitechs, good drop shot baits. But we're going to talk about specifically like a normal 3-inch. Sometimes I throw a 4-inch worm or a 3-inch, but 3 inches mainly my size for a drop shot worm. It works well. It's like what I catch most. It's pretty much my most used finesse tackle. I've caught 50% of my fish ever was on like most of them were on the drop shot, because I mainly fish these types of clear water, 15, 30 feet visibility, the very highly pressured prairie kind of forest preserve areas. So the drop shot works so well. It just kind of mimics like even like a benthic worm or a little bait fish that's not moving fast through the water column like you would kind of use with a swim bait, but it's kind of just suspended and it's still right there, so the bass can track them easily. I love throwing the drop shot. If you don't throw a drop shot, you're just missing out. I don't know why you wouldn't throw it. So the next one, this bait reeks. It's off. I love throwing wacky rigs, but my God, Berkeley, why do you have to make me smell like? God. So next we got a wacky rig. Typically, I love throwing a wacky rig. Like a 5-inch senko is my favorite to throw because it catches fish of all sizes, especially in clear water. It works great. Smallmouth, largemouth. Everyone knows how to throw a wacky rig. It's one of the most popular ways to catch fish. It also works well in these clear water areas. But one thing about the wacky rig, I wouldn't say this is your go-to bait. Your Roboworm, your Keitech, and your drop shot, I would suggest go to those finesse tactics before this one, for sure, because as the years go on, people are using the wacky rig much more. In my areas where I fish, it's been almost impossible to catch them on a wacky rig, while I've been catching all my fish on actually a Keitech and a Ned rig. Drop shot too, but mostly that Keitech and Ned rig. Now, we're going to go on to some of the other kind of baits that some people would classify as finesse, some people won't. I'm kind of in the middle with this next bait. This next bait is going to be a 5-inch swim bait. Now, you might think this is definitely not a finesse bait. It's a 5-inch swim bait. It's what a lot of guys would say you would use for big bass. Typically, I've caught bass from like 10 inches to 5 pounds on this bait. And that's why actually I really like this bait a lot. It's not much bigger than, or it's just a little bit, oh, that's an awful way of representing. It's just a little bit smaller than that 5-inch senko. It's just got a little bit beef, it's got a little paddle tail, and it actually, why I like this a lot around here is we have golden shiners. Now, golden shiners in our area are not actually golden. They're actually, I would say, like a silvery color. That's why I love throwing these 4.8 Keitechs or any 5-inch swim bait, because it's not a pattern people throw a lot, and I find it work really well catching a lot of fish and even bigger fish. So you might be asking, well, how would I throw this? Sometimes my favorite ways to throw this is I'd throw it out, and sometimes I just give it a nice reel back as if it was just a nice little bait fish swimming through the water column. that works more so during, I'd say the spawn, pre-spawn, not during like the spawn, that's when I would actually throw just kind of like a jig on beds, but pre-spawn, post-spawns when that worked. But when I get later into the summer, this bait still works really, really well. I use this actually as a bottom bait. I just swim it really slow through the water column, and it's actually just touching bottom. And if I had to guess how slow I'm moving it, so let's say I'm moving it right here. Is it, can you see it right here? Okay. It's probably just going right through the water column at that speed. That. And now a lot of people throw a Texas rig, but they won't throw a swim bait like this. And when I throw a swim bait like this, man, I get bites when nothing else will. Especially like if I throw a jig there for the past few days, or even a Ned rig and some of these other smaller baits. They'll eat this instead of this, especially if this is a bigger meal and it's easier for them to eat in those August, September, you know, where it's really hot. They want a big meal, but they don't want to move too fast or exert as much energy to just get something that's tiny like this. And we all know it's going to work during that fall time when they're especially eating bait fish. You'll be swimming it just like how I would for pre-spawn and post-spawn fish, and especially with an underspin when there's a lot of bait fish around. So that's the 4.8 Keitech, one of my favorite overall baits all year to throw. Now my next bait I'm going to use, actually one of my favorite baits to throw. This is going to be a Finesse jig. Finesse jig, this is one of my first baits I've ever used, really. It gets it done when, really, I'm typically, when I'm throwing up shallow in these clear water areas, they're not going to eat a full body jig. So you got to downsize, and how I make up for it is I throw a Finesse jig, and it also gets big bites and it gets a lot of bites. Especially, you're not going to throw a 7-pound or 6-pound test in wood brush piles and wood, so that's where I would throw my Finesse jig. It's also going to give you some bigger bites too. I throw it on everything from 12 to 10 and even 8-pound. A lot of people don't throw these on 8-pound fluoro, but I went with actually a private lesson with a little girl who was fishing with me, and the rest were throwing a Ned rig and Keitech. But the problem was, typically you would think it's like a 12-pound line kind of deal, but I put her on with this bait with 8-pound, and she actually caught the biggest fish of the day, and she reeled in just fine with 8-pound. Never would have thought that. What was I gonna say? No. So what I'm saying is, she was able to penetrate the hook just well. She was like 7 years old, penetrating this size of hook with 8-pound line into the fish's mouth. So those are the baits I would use. I'm trying to think if I miss anything. Oh yeah, color, especially with swim baits. I own 4.8 Keitechs and bluegill colors, and I know bluegill is also another forage. These are 3.8s. I throw sungill sometimes. I don't really catch that many fish on them. And so when I'm trying to catch even bluegills in high visibility waters, I still even throw a swim jig, which would be too, I think people would think it'd be too bold, but swim jig in really clear water still works really well. So back to the swim bait side of things, I'm mainly throwing these for golden shiner lakes pretty much, or even shad. We don't have that much shad around here, not at all. So I think there is some shad in here, but this is definitely not a clear water lake. That's muddy as all hell, but this is meant for very clear water when you have those very silvery shiners. So you might be thinking, what is my favorite rods or lines for it? Typically, I would say the most universal rod for around here, 7-foot medium. You could throw almost all these baits on a 7-foot medium. Maybe not this if you're throwing it on a swim bait, like a non-exposed hook, like a Texas rig hook. But with like a Finesse hook, you'll definitely be able to throw it with that. Throw it on jig, wacky rig, all of the other baits too. And so basically my overall rod for it, if I get it untangled, my Daiwa Tatula 7.3 medium with a Shimano Integra. There's a 7-pound line on it because I throw like my heavier Finesse applications on it. with a 10-pound mainline leader. Pretty much what they're on all my reels is a 10-pound mainline leader, and then a different type of leader. Yeah, 10-pound mainline, and then this one I have 6-pound Seeger Tatsu as my leader, and I'm throwing most of my lighter applications on this rod and reel. It's the actual action is a 7.6 light. Now we can go on a different video for rod actions and everything, but this is a 7.6 light with a 2000 size reel. The other, this other one's a 2500 size. That's typically what I like to do. A lot of people like 3000, but I like to feel some of those like the reels that are a little bit smaller. So yeah. The other thing is, I'm trying to think of one more thing. So the Finesse jig, 7-foot medium heavy. I like to throw it on a medium heavy more so with 12-pound line. Sometimes I like to throw a straight fluorocarbon. Sometimes I like to go to 40-pound main line or 30-pound main line to 12-pound mono leader for these Finesse jigs. And then you can, oops, drop that. Then you can switch over to a Keitech. So I think that pretty much covers it. Oops, rods are gonna attack me. So if you guys have any questions, put it down in the comments. If you like the video, give it a like, or if you really hated this video and don't want to watch our videos again, give it a really big dislike and give all of us your hate in our comments. We accept it. And then I think that's it. I'm Quinn from EQ Fishing Guides. Check out our page and our group page where you can post a picture of whatever fish. We can ask questions, and that's where we can interact. This is our first video, so we're trying to grow. We're trying to continue our business throughout the Chicagoland area, mainly through DuPage County. We'll expand later in the business if you guys support us. Thanks for watching.